Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice, the show for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. I, of course, am your host, Chris White. And let me emphasize a key point. These are live conversations. It is 1 o'clock on a Monday afternoon here in the eastern part of the United States. By the way, it is tax day in the United States, so happy tax day to those of you who need to get that done. Happy Easter Monday for those of you who celebrate Easter, and hopefully you enjoyed a nice weekend. I am absolutely delighted to welcome this week's guest. When I saw her LinkedIn profile, I knew she was someone I had to reach out to. She and I had a brief conversation about a month ago, and I knew I had picked the right person, Miss Staci Okine. She is a director of systems engineering with Palo Alto. And honestly, folks, one of the best titles I've ever heard. She is the former leader, coach, and visionary of Badass Engineering Talent, formerly with another company, but we'll not mention that company because Palo Alto is who you're with now. Staci, welcome. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I am delighted to have you. How are you doing? How are things going? A moment ago, you said you've got kids at home because I guess they're off from school today.
Yes, well, they just skedaddled, so I heard the door close and they're out of the house. So they are no longer home, but they're good, enjoying this rainy day off.
Indeed. Well, and she mentioned to me a moment ago that she's, in addition to all the other things that she does professionally, she's also trying to raise a couple of teenage boys, and she and I agreed we probably could have spent an hour just chatting about some of the challenges involved in that. But of course, we're going to turn our attention a little bit to work. But before I get there, Staci, I do have a very important question to ask.
Yes, sir.
I understand you live in Ohio. Am I correct about that?
You are correct.
And is this home? Like, are you a native Ohioan?
I am not.
You're not. So what
I'm originally born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You may see the Steelers picture over my left shoulder.
I see that. All right. Now, have you become an Ohio State fan at all, or is that still enemy territory there for you?
So I've been to a game.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
And you know what? This is probably blasphemy in Columbus, Ohio, but I actually time my shopping around Ohio State games. So anytime there's a game, I can count on getting a very close parking spot and the stores will be empty.
That is fantastic.
So I probably shouldn't say that on
you know what? You come by it honestly. You come by it honestly. Well, the reason I ask, so I married into an Ohio State family. So my wife bleeds scarlet and gray, as they say. So I have to admit, I have become a fan. You know, it's funny. We used to say that about the Redskins, the team formerly known as the Redskins here in the DC area. I'm a big fan, so I would never go shopping. But, you know, people used to say, you know, go shopping during the game if you want to, you know, like to your point. That's not a problem anymore because we haven't been very good for a long time. So, anyway, I'm gonna move us beyond that, Staci. Thank you for spending some time with us. I always like inviting people to share with the group what propelled them into the pre-sales, the sales engineering profession. Do you mind taking just a minute and sharing a little bit more about, you know, your background and how you ended up into pre-sales?
Not at all. I always tell people I ended up in this job because of pizza, and it really is true.
I love that.
So my background is technical. I graduated from Spelman College, which is a historically Black college and university in Atlanta, with a major in computer science and a minor in math. Right after college, I went to work as a programmer at Eli Lilly and Company. And very quickly, I realized that programming wasn't the role for me. And in that year and a half of being a programmer, I was doing some volunteer work, and one of the people that I was working with was in computer networking.
Mm,
And I thought this is pretty cool, right? Like you're interacting with operations
yeah.
teams. You're not just sitting in front of a computer coding all day. And so I
Yeah.
started to learn more about networking.
Mm,
And eventually I went for a role in operations and networking. I didn't get the role. I was told you either have to have a degree or equivalent experience.
interesting.
And so I applied for a master's program in
Mm,
telecommunications, and I didn't get in immediately, but quite uh, kind of happenstance, a role opened up at another location, and
mm,
I did about 6 months of computer networking, and this was in a data center, right? So I'm pulling
mm.
cables under the floor, I'm racking and stacking switches and
Wow.
routers and all
Yeah.
of that. I'm doing variable length subnet masking, all this very technical.
You just went above my technical pay grade, by the way, with that term. I just want to make it clear. You had me with pulling wires.
Very, very technical, hands-on, which is quite different from just programming.
Yeah.
And and I did that for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, I got a letter from the University of Pittsburgh saying they had a spot for me in their master's program.
Wow.
So I left that job and pivoted to a master's program full time.
Wow.
And that was a 2-year program. I did a lot of electrical engineering, cryptography classes, everything
Mm,
related to computer networking.
yeah.
And Cisco was coming to recruit my second year in the program.
Mm.
And they had flyers posted, and they posted the role as a pre-sales engineer, which I just ignored, right? I'm like, I'm a technical engineer. What is this sales thing they speak of, right? And so I just it didn't even cross my mind to attend this information session.
Yeah, yeah.
And a friend of mine said, "Hey, Cisco's here to recruit. We should go." And I said, "It's pre-sales. What is that? I'm technical. I'm not a seller."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, they have free pizza." So that's it. All it takes for me is free pizza. I print out a resume. We go down to it actually was on the first floor of the building we were in, and we
Mm,
walk into this room, and they're presenting on their company background, and there are
yeah.
some recruiters and employees in the back of the room. And walk in, I just kind of casually hand over my resume
Yeah.
and beeline for the pizza, because
You're there
that's
for the
what it's
pizza.
all
Yeah.
about, right? And they look at someone, an employee comes over, and she looks at the resume, and she says, "You're not on the campus interview schedule, and it's full. Would you mind coming into the Cisco office to interview?" And
Wow.
she had looked at my resume, and on the resume it had the fact that I had worked with switches and routers and concentrators, and I'm
Yeah.
going to date myself, but like ATM networks and all kinds of technical things.
Yeah.
And they saw that, they asked me to interview, which I did, and everything went well. I was offered a position in their academy, so their
Mm,
systems engineering academy. I
yeah.
was in the very first class of uh, pre-sale systems engineering
Wow.
academy at Cisco, and that
Yeah.
was 22 years ago.
Wow. That's awesome. Is there something that they said, or something that one of them said through that interview process, that changed the way you thought about sales or thought about the role? Like, what was it? Because at that point, I'm sure it felt good to be, sort of, wanted, right? They were
Mhm.
interested in you, but there must have been something that they said that made you sort of change the way you thought about what the role might be. Do you recall what that was?
So one of the key things that caused me to think differently about it was the marriage of the technical and the
Mm,
interpersonal and people skills.
mm,
So
yeah,
that blend that you can be very technical, but you can still be great at relationship building and
mm,
leveraging that to be successful in the role, right?
yeah,
And kind of this emotional intelligence element that creates a very successful systems engineer, a
yeah,
people person, the soft skills, presenting,
yeah,
speaking in front of crowds, all those things. So just that blend was very intriguing
yeah, yeah.
to me.
That is so fantastic. And by the way, Stacy, I can't help but draw attention to the fact that it sounded like very early on, even before you got into the master's program, you took a couple shots, for lack of a better term,
Mhm,
that didn't work out. Right?
mhm.
You applied to a job and you weren't accepted. Sounds like you applied to a master's program, you weren't accepted, but you kept taking your shots. Then you found this other opportunity, and when the door opened, you went, right? And then
Mhm.
Pittsburgh came knocking, and when that door opened, you went. And of course it was just pizza, but there was the opportunity and you went.
Yeah.
And I just think, just if anyone listening, and by the way, folks, we don't see who's with us, so if you do care to say hello, if you care to ask Stacy or myself a question, please, by all means, do so, and we'd love to hear from you. But for anybody listening, if they take nothing else from this, just that determination that you demonstrated very early in your career, I think speaks volumes. Now, when you reflect now, so 22 years ago, you've
Mhm.
gone through this interview process. Here you are in this role. What were some of the early lessons that you recall, sort of the early aha moments that you recall as you began to learn and understand this profession?
Ooh, that is a good question. So one of the early lessons for me was mastery of the technology. It's
Mm,
kind of table stakes, to show up in front of the customer with strong technical acumen and credibility. And you work at that over time. I mean, I had several roles. I started out as a generalist systems engineer and then moved into a consulting systems engineer, and these different engineering roles all required up leveling
mm,
technical mastery, going from a generalist into a
yeah.
cybersecurity focus. So that was one of the very early lessons, and for me, I would say maybe even a little bit more critical because I started at a time when there weren't very many women. I mean, I
Mm,
I can recall going into meetings with a male sales counterpart,
mm,
and I'm the technical subject matter expert, and a male client or customer redirects all of the questions to my male counterpart, and no matter how much I interject, right, I'm still not seen
yeah.
as the technical subject matter expert. So because of that, I always felt that I had to to even do a little bit more and really
Mm,
work to be uh, a technical expert, and sometimes not across the entire portfolio, but in many cases, I very strategically manage my brand around a niche portion of a very broad portfolio so that I became the go-to person for this set of the portfolio.
and that story is a good segue into one of the things I know we were going to talk about today, which is diversity and equity and inclusion. And I am curious, what is it that you think that was inside of you that when you were faced with that situation where you're the technical expert, and yet the clients that you're meeting with are asking your sales counterpart the technical questions, because they're sort of giving him the benefit of the doubt because
Mhm.
he's the man. I can imagine a lot of people would have, I don't want to say folded or closed up shop, so to speak, right? But I think a lot of people really would have struggled to rise up in that situation. What was it that you told yourself, and what was it inside of you that made you want to overcome that?
I think it really, for me, is just a standard of excellence that
Mm,
I espouse to, and that was probably created at a very young age by my parents,
mm,
both who set very high standards for my brother and myself. So that had a lot to do with it.
yeah.
And the other part of it was kind of this indirect um, enablement, or perhaps um, helping to educate, right, and bring people along in terms of their perception of
Mm,
what a systems engineer looked like that was very motivating for me to show up
mm,
and be able to change the paradigm in terms of what people traditionally saw as a systems engineer. So that was probably more of like a challenge, a motivating challenge for me to just
mm.
show up and be that paradigm shift of what people traditionally saw.
I so love that. The thoughts going through my mind are, look, I realize that I may not look like the typical systems engineer that you are used to seeing and thinking about in your mind, but not only am I a systems engineer, I'm a badass systems engineer, and I'm here to help.
Exactly.
Right. And
Right.
you just follow my lead, and we're here to help. I'm curious, did your sales counterparts, was there anything that they did to help you sort of establish yourself, and or to shift the direction of questions like that towards you, as rightfully so, as they should have been?
I think over time they did, because sometimes there's this challenge of building credibility with your sales counterpart,
Yeah.
right? To a point where you have to be credible before a lot of times they even want to
Mm.
bring you into the call.
Yep.
So I just think over time I was able to establish that credibility and show up as a technical subject matter expert where they could defer. And one very vivid in my mind, I did have a sales counterpart that redirected
Mm.
back to me
Yeah.
every time the technical conversations or technical questions were directed at him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Stacy, I'm just gonna say, I mean, I applaud you. I do think you're one of the renegades. One of the one of the what's the word I'm looking for? The trailblazers, I think, in this profession. You know, in a as you said, a male dominated profession, and I just think it's so great that we do see, and I know there's a lot of awareness around inclusion and equity, and I know, for me, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most amazing women in this profession. I am curious, what are some of the things? And look, I mean, let's be very real for a minute. I'm a middle-aged white man, right, about to turn 54. And you know what is something that, if you were having a conversation with the 25 or 30-year-old version of me, what would you say to me that would help me better understand how to be more aware of some of the challenges that women in the workplace face, and some of the things that I, as a leader or a manager, could do to create that environment of diversity and inclusion and equity?
It's so simple. It's just ask the question, right? Get
Mm,
get get proximate. Ask someone who is different from you, what is your experience like at, you fill in the blank, whatever company? What is your day to day like?
Mm,
Just asking that question opens up the line of communication for people to really talk about their lived experience and be
yeah,
vulnerable.
yeah.
I had a really profound experience like that with a leader who reached out to me and said, "You're the only woman of color or one of the only women of color within our organization. What's your story? I just want to know your story. I'm going to set up a series of meetings over the next month to 2 months. Would you mind if we just met and could I just ask some questions and get to know your story and what your lived experience is within
Mm,
this company and this organization?"
mm,
And it completely changed our relationship. Just that simple question, "What's your story?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
he asked some tough questions, right? I think that's sometimes the other piece of it is to have the courageous conversation, move outside of the comfort zone a little bit,
Mm,
and be willing to have a courageous conversation about maybe what the lived experience is of someone who's different from you. I mean, it could be somebody in the LGBTQ community, it could
mm,
be, you know, someone who's of a different gender, a different background or ethnicity. So many components to diversity, right?
yeah.
Even if you think about mentoring and switch it up and do some reverse mentoring, like how much could you learn if you are a senior level exec who is
Mm.
being reverse mentored by a millennial or somebody who's much younger than you?
Yeah, yeah. No, and I appreciate you bringing that to my attention and everyone's attention. I mean, and it's interesting. We were talking about kids briefly, and I even find that now. I mentioned to you that I even have kids who are in their mid 20s,
Yeah.
and now there are times now where they'll sit me down and say, Dad, let me see if I can explain the way the world works now. Because you know, so I can appreciate that a great deal. But I want to double click on something that you just said, which is have the courageous conversation. And frankly, you're encouraging me and challenge. I feel like you're even giving me the opportunity to take a half a step further and ask what frankly is a courageous question for me. You mentioned a person of color as both a woman and a person of color, and you reflect on that situation. What do you consider to be a bigger challenge in this profession, and really exceeding or succeeding and excelling in this profession? Is it the challenges faced by women, or is it the challenges faced by people of color, or is that not even a fair question?
Um, it's I think it's a fair question. I, I don't think there's a blanket answer. I think
Mm,
there's so much context and so many other dependabilities that make it a tough question to just say black or white. It's women versus being a person of color. I mean, certainly anytime where you have intersectionalities, like
mm,
being a woman and being a person of color, um, there are I think more hurdles and potentially more biases that you
mm,
face.
mm. And it's and I know we're getting a little bit deep and heavy here, but
Mhm.
I do appreciate your transparency and your sharing, and I think it's worth all of us just understanding, to your point, everybody has a different journey. and everybody has a different set of challenges, and everybody comes from a different background. And I think the more open we can be to everyone's situation, right?
Yep.
Meet people where they are. Be
Mhm.
sincerely curious. And and this leads into another one of the topics we were going to talk about. But you know, be a mentor. But what does it mean to be a mentor to that individual? What are some of the things that you've done first as a mentor to help others grow in the way that they want to?
Mhm. Yeah, so I've done mentoring at many different levels, even as early as working with girls in middle school.
Mm,
And that mentoring is a little different. It's not career focused, but it's around helping them understand all the possibilities that exist for their future and not to paint themselves into this box of, well,
mm,
I'm not good at math or I'm not good at science as a girl, so I could never do that kind of job. I could never do what you do because I'm not good at that.
mm,
And you start to find that uh, girls need the mentoring and the coaching even younger, because really once they get to high school, they fully bought in to those beliefs, and then they start to, choose their classes and their coursework based on the fact that they could never do this because they're not good at math. So
mm.
I've worked with a lot of organizations. I love, working with young girls and just hanging out and sharing my story. And I tell them, I haven't told you, I thought I was gonna be a ballerina. Like that was that was my dream when I was in middle school, and here I'm certainly not a ballerina, right? So things change, and then once you get into the point where you're into a career, mentoring is, uh, and I'll throw coaching in there, right? It's really about sharing some of your experiences in a way that helps someone else maybe not have to go through all of what you went through, or
Mm,
maybe navigate or excel a little bit faster, to to challenge them outside of their
mm.
comfort zone.
Yeah,
I do a lot of that, just asking the hard questions, the challenging questions around the limiting beliefs, etc.
yeah,
And then some of it is very tailored to the day to day of the job.
yeah.
How do you become better in your technical acumen? How do you become a better presenter? How do you even manage your career? So there's lots of different kind of mentoring, but those are some of the things that I do.
I think an important takeaway for me in hearing those words is being a mentor is not only being supportive and encouraging, but it's also challenging them
Mhm, mhm.
and encouraging them to think broader than maybe they're comfortable thinking themselves. And incidentally, I know you said that you're not a ballerina, but I suspect you know how to tiptoe your way through some difficult conversations. Just my guess. I'm pretty sure you've been out there. And by the way, I had to just lighten the mood a little bit. Folks, I'm going to just press our own pause button. I'm speaking with Staci Okine. She's a director of systems engineering with Palo Alto. And we've had a number of really, I think, deep concepts. I'm gonna lighten the mood just a little bit, Staci.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about how you decided, or what made you decide to write leader of badass systems engineering talent on your profile, which I just absolutely love.
Because that's the name of the team that I was leading. So I was a consulting systems engineer on a team that was known as Team Badass, and
That is
the leader of that team moved on, and so I moved up into a people leader role, and the name just kind of stuck. And so as a
I love it.
team, we called ourselves team badass. And
Well,
and everybody wanted to know how they could be on team badass.
I mean, look, you just said what you wanted to be, what you wanted, what you wanted to be when you grew up. I think what I want to be when I grow up is the leader of badass talent. I mean, I mean that's about as good as it gets. You mentioned getting into leadership. We talked a little, and I asked you a few questions about the sort of some of the lessons you learned going
Mhm.
from systems engineer, network engineer to sales engineer. When you made the shift from being what we like to refer to as an individual contributor
Yes.
to
Mhm.
management, were there some early lessons for you when you made that transition?
Yeah. So many lessons, I would say. The first thing is it's becomes less about your work, right?
Mm,
And how you amplify the goodness and the achievement and the successes of
yeah,
your team,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
there's a big difference there. Also, when you're in the pre-sales role as an individual contributor, is very technical. And when I moved into the people, I also had to focus on running the business, which is not always technical, right? Understanding the metrics. How is the business growing? Those kinds of things. How do I align resources accordingly? So it's not it doesn't just stay technical. Now you have to put on your business hat. And
Mm,
that's really, really important as you move from an individual contributor to a people leader role,
that
because
is,
you're held accountable for the success of your business and your organization.
yeah, yeah. Well, and now it's really, it really is a numbers game now,
Yes. Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Right? It's before it was a technology game, a people game, a sales game. Now it's also a numbers game and a management game, right? On
Yes.
top of everything else. So in
Yes.
fact, I'm inspired to share your comment is particularly well timed because as I think some of I know and some of our guests or our attendees may know, I've been working with a gentleman named Kerry Sokolsky on what we're calling the pre-sales buyer's guide, and we've actually reviewed and analyzed almost 20 vendors in the space, and one of the categories is around what we call pre-sales oversight and management. It's the tools
Mhm.
that help leaders like yourself actually run pre-sales like a business. In fact, with your permission, I'm actually going to invite Carrie to join us
Yes,
in our last
absolutely.
5 or 10 minutes to talk a little bit about that. Um, Incidentally, there's a few folks that have chimed in. Casey Smith said, "Thanks for sharing your experience. What a journey so far, Casey. Thanks for chiming in. It's nice to see you."
Thanks,
And actually, a
Casey.
good friend of mine, Brian Crosby, he was actually my guest last week, and similar to you, he was an SE, he was a systems engineer, SE manager, and he's now a director, in fact, with ServiceNow, working on the business. The side of the business is absolutely critical. So, Brian, good to see you. By the way, if anybody else out there cares to say hello or ask Staci a question, I invite you to do so. Um, there was another question that I wanted to ask, and let's get a little bit more focused for just a moment on the actual role of pre-sales.
Mhm.
Are there certain skills or techniques in particular that you try to develop within your team members because you see those as the making a significant difference in their performance and their effectiveness in the field?
Yeah, the first thing I do is I try to help the team understand what is their superpower. But like,
Mm,
what is this role? Why is it important? Why do we do what we do? What is our purpose? And fundamentally, when I break it down, I define our superpower as pre-sales engineers is accelerating value realization for the
Mm,
customer, right?
mm,
Helping them understand the value of the solution, of the software, of the hardware, of the architecture, of the design in a way where we minimize any concerns or fears they may have in the investment in
mm,
that product in order to accelerate and help the customer get to a buying decision.
mm,
So that's what I try to help them understand fundamentally. And once they understand that, then you can help them understand, well, here are some tools, here are some levers we can pull to accelerate value realization. And it's all built on top of, we have to be strong technically. We have to show up with credibility, meaning we don't
mm.
only master the portfolio, but we are masterful in our understanding of the industry. So my industry is cybersecurity. The end game for me is not for engineers to only understand Palo Alto products, but to help customers see around corners in terms of what's happening in the industry from a threat perspective.
Mm.
And and I would say lastly, I mean there are many skills that I want them to have, but one of the most critical is whatever we are trying to accelerate the value realization of, it needs to align to customer business outcomes,
Mm.
right? So we're not going to sell a widget just to sell a widget. We have to be solving the customer's problems. And sometimes it's problems they don't really even know they have until we ask the right questions. And
Very
then
good.
once we understand the problems we're trying to solve and the customer's business outcomes that they're trying to get to, then and only then should we be recommending a solution or a software or service.
Mm. I have to say, Staci, I've had a lot of really intelligent and talented guests, but the last 2 or 3 minutes may be 2 or 3 of my favorite minutes of this program. You said so many powerful things there. I love this term, accelerate value realization. I am going to use that, I think, in some of my programs. So, and I will give you all the credit that is
Awesome.
due. But I absolutely love the mental image that you've created there. It really is our job to minimize the concerns and fears that customers have, and not just about making an investment, but
Yeah.
in trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve, right? I mean, I
Mhm,
think a
mhm.
big, to your point, a lot of times, I think a lot of the organizations we speak to, they have excuse me, they have some idea of where they're trying to go, right? They have some idea of what they're trying to accomplish, but there's oftentimes fear and uncertainty and concerns about how to get there, right?
Yes.
Usually, and it's usually the unknown, right? We tend to fear the unknown. So the more that we can fill in, and alleviate the unknown, the better. And I think I told you when you and I first spoke, I think you used the term "see around corners." I mean, just another great mental image comes to mind for me, helping our customers see around the corners, right? See the things that we know are sort of, laying in wait, right?
Yes.
To sort of jump out and cause problems that they're just not aware of. But by the way, we've had a few people chime in that I just want to quickly recognize. Daryl Chase has just given you a great deal of praise. Another female working
Thank
in the
you,
industry.
Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl, thank you for sharing. It's nice of you to chime in. Alvin is a regular participant. So Alvin, thanks for chiming in. Good to see you. And Douglas Patterson, totally agree. Thanks for chiming in, Douglas. It's
Thanks,
nice to see you
Douglas.
as well. Not surprising in the least, Stacy. Your words are certainly resonating with some people. You use the term superpower, so you know I'm going here.
Uh-oh.
What is your superpower, Miss Okine?
My superpower is creating strong, badass teams.
I was hoping you were going to say that
Yeah,
word.
yeah. And I love to have a team and see and determine everybody's strengths, and
Mm,
then kind of create this puzzle where people can leverage their strengths collectively in the team in such a way where we create, a collective ambition, right? We're
mm.
all in this together, and we've leveraged and linked strengths in such a way that we deliver results in a very unprecedented way to the business.
Hmm. Again, you're just giving me so many good terms. I just love the term you just used, collective ambition. Again, the mental image I get is not only that we're all in this together, but we're all driving towards a common goal, right?
Mhm, mhm.
There's nothing that quite summarizes it quite like that word ambition. Is there, we've all been, as you and I are now, for the most part, we've been talking to one another through the lens of a camera, as I like to say.
Mhm.
Is there anything in particular that you did during the past couple of years to try to create this feeling of a collective ambition and build that badassery of a team around you?
Well, it's certainly been more of a challenge because of the distance, and just not being together in an office. So I think anything that creates camaraderie, and camaraderie can be created virtually.
Mm,
Like if we just show up and not discuss work and do something fun,
yeah,
that certainly helps with camaraderie. And luckily at Palo Alto, we are starting to get back out and be able to come together as a team. So
yeah.
that certainly helps quite a bit. But I think I I think when you leverage people's strengths in a way that they can be, um, shared across the team, that also has been very successful, right? So if this is my superpower, um, and somebody else is in need of that superpower, connecting the dots, and I really do this across organizations. I'm a
Mm,
connector, so I remember people's strengths, their passions, and then when somebody says I need this person or I need this skill set, I kind of go into my mental Rolodex and say,
mm,
oh, this person can help with that. So that, I think that also helps, right, create this collective ambition, and it can be done virtually, but you pull somebody who's in need of a skill set together with somebody who's
mm,
got that specific skill set, and magic happens, right? And you
yeah.
you can do a lot of great things with that.
Mm.
So that has been one of the other things that has been really helpful. And everybody, loves to play and work to their strength. Right?
Incredibly well
And
said.
people, and generally, I believe that people, uh, want to help other people, and people wanna be connected. So just the more we can create these natural connections, it builds camaraderie, and we can still do it virtually.
So I just observed what I believe are two more of your superpowers. I think one of them is connecting people, And the other is you just have a really positive outlook on people in general. I mean, I can tell just in the few conversations that you and I have had that you just see that you see the best in people and you bring it out of them. And you're right, people play best when they are playing to their strengths. So I have to say, Staci, your words are inspiring to me. By the way, just a few more comments. Sean Myers is someone who appears on the regular. Sean, it's good to see you. And Daryl's decided that you need your own podcast. So anytime you want to fill in for me if I need to take a break,
I love it.
You just say the word. I may have to outsource.
Daryl is calling me outside of my comfort zone.
There you go. She's challenging you. I love it. So Staci, I mentioned a moment ago that we're going to invite my friend and colleague Carrie in here in just a minute. And folks, if you care to hang around, Carrie and we're going to invite Staci to hang around as well. We're going to talk a little bit about this vendor report that we're about to publish. But before we go there, I just want to ask you a couple quick questions in sort of lightning round phase.
Sure.
As you reflect on your career, is there one piece of advice that you got in particular that has really resonated with you your entire and really stuck with you your entire career?
I'll just mention one that's been really helpful for me from a career management perspective, and that is to build your board of directors. So that means, you have your mentors, you have your sponsors, you have at certain levels in your career, you will have an executive coach. And lastly, you must have your wolf pack, right? And so people who know me, they know who my wolf pack is, which is a team of a team of 4 other Black female systems engineering leaders, and we meet regularly. And so whoever that needs to be for you could be different, but you absolutely should have a support system that you can just bounce things off of. You can laugh with, you can travel with. We do trips together. So I would say make sure you have built out that board of directors.
Again, you've given me another great term and a great mental image. By the way, do you know Tia Hopkins? Is that a name that has crossed your path?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay. Tia, and I owe her a phone call. She was literally my first client. She gave me my first job when I launched this business. So I need to reach out to her and so she's
amazing. She's amazing.
She's a mega superstar now in the whole cybersecurity world. So she probably doesn't have time for a lowly guy like me.
I know. I can't keep up with Tia. She's huge in the security space.
She's fantastic. Well, Staci, you have absolutely been fantastic, and I just can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. Are you a hugger? I'm going to ask probably an embarrassing question. Are you a hugger? Or are you not much of a hugger?
Yes,
because I have to say, like, if we were on stage together, I'd be giving you a hug right now because you have touched me in so many ways. I have to admit, I am a bit of a hugger, and I'd be giving you a hug to thank you for all the words you've shared. And you use the term board of directors. I'm actually now going to invite someone who's actually on my board of directors, Mr. Kerry Sokolsky, who runs Pre-Sales Mastery. Can we invite him in now and have a quick conversation around this vendor guide that we've been working on? Are you good with that? All right. There he is. Kerry, welcome. I know you've had a chance to listen to some of what we've said. Before we talk about the guide, any immediate reflections on anything that Staci shared?
Well, like you mentioned, Chris, and hi, Staci. It was fascinating listening to you.
Hey, Kerry.
I think, like you mentioned, Chris, I think you've got your work cut out for you. You've got enough sound bites, I think, just from this session alone to last for quite a while. So some really, really fascinating insights. It was great to hear.
Thank you.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I feel like I could almost take a month off and just replay this, and like my ratings, if there even is such a thing, I think would go up. So Carrie, we've talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to just put the spotlight right on you and give you a chance to share a little bit about what it is that we've done, what have we been working on, and what can people expect to see in this report that's being published today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. So as you, Chris, are well aware, it's been a long 6-month journey for both of us, both collecting, assimilating, and then processing, and now writing a pretty comprehensive guide on the top vendors in the marketplace for pre-sales, whether they're targeting pre-sales leadership or pre-sales individual contributors. The market has exploded over the last couple of years. And you and I saw a gap in terms of both awareness of who was out there and clarity in terms of what each of the vendors actually did and could help pre-sales organizations accomplish. And so we took it upon ourselves to go out and basically build a buyer's guide for the sales community. And it's been a fascinating journey. I have to say, for all those watching, Chris is as amazing to work with directly as he is to watch and learn from afar. It's been an unbelievable journey. I don't think I could have survived it had it not been such an amazing colleague to work with on this. So thanks, Chris, for all your help over the last many, many months. And that obviously is continuing. In terms of the guide itself, really what it's going to do for buyers is it's going to help pre-sales leaders make more informed buying decisions. There's so scarce dollars available to us typically in pre-sales. We so rarely hold budget, and so it's such a struggle to get investment into our teams. It really is incumbent upon us to be as judicious as possible with the investment dollars that we do get thrown our way when it becomes available. And so we hope that this guide will help pre-sales leaders figure out where they probably should consider focusing their spend. And then once they do that, understand who the vendors are and make better decisions on which ones they should evaluate and how they should evaluate them so that they are successful when they do finally go ahead and purchase and implement a solution.
Yeah. And Staci, I'm curious to ask you, as a pre-sales leader, I mean, you literally are the ideal sort of profile for the guide that we've written. Have you and your organization there, have you all made any investments in any tools specifically for the pre-sales teams, or is it something that the teams are considering?
So I personally haven't, and I've been at Palo Alto 6 months now. So there may be other segments of the business that may be using them, but I can tell you that I know that there are systems engineering leaders who are asking, because as these vendors reach out to me, they'll tell me, hey, we talked to so-and-so in your organization. So I think there's definitely interest, but to your point, Carrie, the concern is always the dollars.
Yeah.
How do you justify the investment in some of these tools?
Yeah. Well, and if I may, the other problem that we are seeing, Staci, is not only how do we justify the investment, but where do we invest? Because you've got tools that are really designed to help the leaders like yourself run the organization as a business. There are tools more designed to help the individual contributors sort of be more effective in their day-to-day work. There's demo automation. There's response management automation. We have another sort of subcategory called like presentation and data tools. So, the first question to consider really is, which one of these levers should we even consider pulling, and what's the advantage of doing so? And then if we can narrow that down, well, there's actually 5 or 6 or maybe more vendors to consider, and what are some of the pros and cons. So we're hoping that this guide will help people do that. Now, I've used, and Carrie's used the term guide. The truth, and I think when people think guide, they hear like a downloadable PDF or something.
Document, yeah.
As it turns out, we're in the process, and it's about to go live. We've actually published a website. Carrie, do you want to talk just a little bit about why we published it as a website to begin with, and what are some of the specific things that people will find when they go there?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we recognized fairly quickly, especially given that this was, a 6+ month journey, that given that we started our research in September, publishing in April, like most other of these types of buyers guides that are out there, or Gartner Market Scopes and the like, they can be very dated by the time they actually get out into the public. And we wanted the information to be as timely as possible on an ongoing basis. And so, especially given that this particular space is evolving so quickly, in fact, since we closed our sort of invitations to the vendors, we found another 9 vendors over the last several months that have sort of popped up in this space. And so rather than have them excluded and have to wait for another year and distribute a document that is already going to be out of date, we figured, let's put it on a website where we now give ourselves the opportunity to, at a much more frequent and regular interval, update the information so that people are looking at much more timely information. If new vendors do start to surface, we can add them to the guide without having to wait an entire year, so that people can get a much better sense of what's happening in the market today. In terms of what's available in the guide, it's like most of these types of reports, you'll have an executive summary of our findings overall, what we thought the sort of key themes were. We help describe, as Chris mentioned, what are the problems that they have, help them prioritize them, and then based on that, determine which areas to invest in. So we do a lot of write-ups on those particular focus areas, key benefits of solving the problems, what are the challenges, what are the things you need to consider if you're going to evaluate vendors in those particular areas. And then for any of the vendors that are participating, we've developed a very detailed profile of those vendors, description of the vendor and what they do, their unique capabilities. We are not, and I think this is important to clarify, this is not a report where we are grading the vendors. We are not plotting them on a chart against each other. This market is too nascent. It's too new, too rapidly expanding, that had we done that, it really would have done us a disservice to the majority of the vendors who really are less than 2 years old. And so this is more what Chris and I are sort of calling an information dissemination play. It's meant to get the information out into the market and help pre-sales leaders make more informed decisions, but not tell them who we think the best vendors are necessarily.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carrie. So, folks, for any of you who are still with us, the website goes live, we hope today before midnight. we were striving to get it done today. I think we're pretty close. So, and Carrie, I'm correct. It's presalesbuyersguide.com. Is that correct?
That is correct. presalesbuyersguide.com.
Fantastic. And Staci, I want to thank you again for your time. I am looking at the time.
Thanks for having me.
It's been. Can you believe we've been at this for an hour?
Time flies when you're having fun. So
it really does, doesn't it? Well, you were an absolutely delightful guest, and you are definitely going to be invited to reappear. And who knows, maybe we'll just invite you to run the show. Since you have such a fan base now, that maybe do wonders for our ratings. Staci, any closing words from you as we close up shop here?
Not really, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity. I really am so appreciative of just the opportunity to chat with you. Like I said, I was already familiar with your book. I have it on my Kindle. So it's just been a privilege to talk to you, and Carrie, great to meet you as well.
Likewise. Well, thank you for those kind words. And folks, thank you for hanging around. I will make a quick plug because my colleagues tell me I don't talk enough about what we do. If you want to learn more about tech sales advisors, you can go to techsalesadvisors.com, and we're offering online training for individuals on demodoctor.com. So you can go check that out as well. If you like these programs and want to follow along, go to hashtag tech sales advice and follow the hashtag, and you'll be alerted whenever we do these things. And of course, you can go check out some of the old sessions. And with that, Staci, hang around just for a minute because we're going to give you your parting gift. Otherwise, folks, thanks so much for being here. Carrie, thank you for making a cameo appearance. And we'll see you next week, folks. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye all.